Minecraft's excellent platform and sheer variety of creative pathways make it the perfect place for me to spew all the creative gunk floating around in my head. The game's mechanics work like no other, giving millions of players countless hours of fun. The most common types of creative outpour I find comes in the form of houses, and I believe almost every player finally remembers their first. I certainly do. It was quite fun. I remember it quite clearly, actually. So, with this fond memory in mind, I've decided to build 8 reasonably sized houses in a variety of different styles for your viewing pleasure. So, without further ado, let's begin with this desert house I have prepared for you. This house is a little simpler in design than most of the others I've built, simply because the desert style kind of demands it. Although I've tried to break it up a little bit by using blocks like birch logs in order to contrast a little bit more with the desert floor, but without breaking the style too much. As you can see here, it's more of like a self-sustaining build. It's got lots of crops, lots of gardens on the roof. I've tried to make this sort of look like a garden you'd find on top of a skyscraper, for instance. Just to add a little bit of a modern touch, even though it is more of an old style. Coming on the inside, I've tried to keep it simplistic as well, just with simple layout, not too much going on. I didn't want to overwhelm anyone with detail, because this block is obviously nice and smooth, and I wouldn't want to contrast that with too much brazen detail, I like to say. So here are the gardens, and there's a living quarters up here with some beds. This house fits within a 23 by 21 area, and these are the blocks I've used. See, there's quite a lot of variation. You obviously don't have to use all these blocks if you don't have access to them. I've just used the full creative inventory because, well, I'm in creative. So, yeah, on to the next house, which, as you can tell, was one of the more complex ones and took me quite a while to build. This style, I think, demands heavy detail, although it has to be in the right place. Of course, I'm talking about like a rundown woodland house. I'm quite happy with this build. It's one of my favorites, and I've tried to incorporate lots of color to it because I find a lot of times when I build rustic houses like this, it tends to be all in shades of brown or gray. So I've tried to break that by incorporating some green terracotta and some black terracotta into it. As you can see here, I've gone with the basic kind of frame design, but I've broken it up a bit by making the top spew out. And I think that's something anyone should keep in mind when building houses, is not to conform to the rules too much. Obviously, rules are fun. Well, rules, I say rules, they're not really rules, but guidelines of building frames is fun, but it can get a little bit exhausting when you're trying to build in large quantities or trying to build something extra detailed when you're trying to fit within that. So by breaking out, you can create some pretty cool looking builds like this, which I think is I'm pretty happy with. On the inside, you can see I've decorated in a darker sort of palette to contrast the outside, and you can see I've added black terracotta, which is a very dark shade of brown, in order to cover up some of the windows that are in inconvenient spots. And I'd say this with most of my builds. I would say this with most of my builds is, don't be afraid to cover up windows that you're not happy with looking from the inside. You can always make them look like they exist on the outside. And I think that works quite well in this build. It looks just like, you know, an empty room that's has no light coming into it. I've tried to stick with the rustic theme throughout. You can see I've used barrels on the bottom just to kind of give it a bit of a rundown vibe, like it's been patched together. Here's the fireplace. The smoke actually reaches all the way to the top, which is nice. The upstairs corridor isn't quite as detailed as the bottom, and here's the bedroom, just with a desk and the bed and everything. And you can see here I've used trapdoors for the windows just to, again, give it a rustic, rundown vibe. And you can see I haven't done that with the bottom windows. I just didn't want to incorporate too much detail and make it exhausting. So yeah, here's a roof view for you. I love the chimney on this. I think it worked out quite nicely with the size. Another thing to note is don't be afraid to use lots of campfires. Campfires are an amazing block that can be used for stacked wood, can be used for containers for food if you use a water bottle to extinguish it after you put food on. I think I saw that in a Jarecraft video. This house fits within a 17 by 18 area, so it's quite a bit smaller than that house, even though it doesn't look quite like it. But it has just as much living space. Here are the blocks I've used in that house. There's quite a lot more. I think this house uses the most blocks out of any of the ones I built. And again, don't be intimidated by the number of blocks I used. You can obviously build something like it with much less material. I'm just trying to take advantage of the entire creative inventory. So, let's move on to the photocopier. I say photocopier because it kind of turned out like a photocopier. But this, of course, is my interpretation of a modern house, and I've tried to use strange colors. This stripped acacia wood is a very lovely shade of pink, and you can see that when it's put next to a real orange block like the red sand I've used. And of course I've used red sandstone around the windows to give it a little bit of differentiation. There isn't really much to say about the exterior of this house except my process for building it, which is basically start with a block, put one of the big ridges around, and then start building blocks in between. And sometimes it looks good, sometimes it doesn't. It's all trial and error in my eyes. I don't really have a put-down process for building these. On the interior here, you can see it's quite simplistic. I've got a nice rag carpet made out of jungle leaves, and I've got a ceiling made out of mushroom stems, which I think is a fantastic block to do ceilings with. As you can see, it also does this, where if you place a mushroom block next to it, it'll become sort of like a popcorn ceiling texture. But, of course, that's not very appropriate for this build, since it's more in stark shades of white, orange, or pink. Yeah, here's a modern staircase. I tried to make sort of like the ones that look like they're floating off the wall. The upstairs room, there isn't very much going on here. You actually have to crouch to go down the stairs, just based on the height, but that's nice. It's a nice addition to 1.14. Yeah, so that's that house. It fits in a 10 by 13 area, and here are the blocks I used. Now, on to my futuristic house. With this house, I tried to go all out with my futuristic style. I figured, well, the future is in the future, and pretty much anything goes at this point, as long as it's clean and white textured, so I came up with this. It looks kind of like a microphone. I've tried to combat that with the gills on the top, but as you can see, water elevators run the entire height of the house, and it sort of works as a lighthouse, I guess, with the sea lanterns here, so maybe you could find this on some future shore, or maybe on an asteroid or something, warning approaching starships. On the inside, it's quite simplistic. I didn't really do too much on the inside, except for the bubble columns, which basically take you all the way up. All layers are pretty much the same, except on the top there's a trapdoor, and there are 2 beds, and that's pretty much it. And if you make your way down here, you'll notice the bubbles don't actually extend all the way up here. That is because if I had source blocks in this and that, it would just flood the whole room, which is a little bit frustrating. I didn't account for that when I built the actual house. It looks like there's some glass missing. Damn vandals. Oh, wait, that's me. Yeah, so all the floors are pretty much the same. I didn't really know too much what to do, so I just kind of left them blank. I suppose this could be like maybe an apartment building or something as well as a lighthouse. Here's some just grates that hide lighting. And I've tried to complete the outside with a ring of jungle leaves just to give it a little bit of a natural approach, like it's been manicured, like it's some rich person's, offshore estate. This house fits in a very small area, 15 by 13, and here are the blocks I used, mostly stark white, which fits well with the futuristic, I think, and I think the bands on the side work nicely with the water texture. On to the next one, which is probably one of the most complicated ones I have. This, of course, being my fairy tale / fantasy kind of house, and calling it a house is a little bit of a stretch, but I just thought I'd kind of go all out with this one and see what I could do, maybe with natural. I'm not super well with naturals, this took me quite a while, but I'm pretty happy with it. This, of course, it could be sort of a treehouse. It might work as a treehouse as well. I just thought building mushrooms would add a little bit more to it. So as you can see here, there's just a bit of a campsite, and you basically have to climb up a rock and go up some ladders using ladders mounted on trapdoors, which is obviously a new thing. Now, you can't open these trapdoors, the ladders will come off, which is a little bit tough, but so-so. It's a good payoff for, I think, being able to mount them in the first place. So yeah, there's beds up here. The interior, if you can call it an interior, isn't too complicated. There's just some storage, some lighting, and that's pretty much it. I've tried to keep this very rustic and simple, because obviously, if this is a micro size and like people were huge compared to this, there wouldn't be too much going on. I doubt anyone would have time to build a fancy house before being stepped on, I guess. You can see the wood pile down here, and lots of detail in the rocks. I try to say, don't be afraid of adding too much detail to rocks. Rocks in real life are incredibly detailed, and it's hard to go overboard with them, and always take advantage of what you have. And of course, I have the creative inventory, so I have access to everything, which means I can use blocks like dead coral blocks, which are incredible for detailing rocks and stuff. And you can see here I've used birch, the entire log variant of birch wood, just to make the stems, because it adds some texture and makes it look a little less clean, which of course, nature isn't exactly clean. It's clean in its own right, but not clean in human terms. This house fits in quite a large area. It fits in a 25 by 21, and here are all the blocks I've used to build the mushrooms. My advice with building mushrooms like this is just to continuously eyeball it. It's going to take time. Don't expect it to take a very short amount of time. Expect it to take quite a while, just because, well, getting the shape perfect from all angles is going to take a few tries. It's very rare that I get shapes like this right in the first try. This took me about half an hour to do each of the mushrooms. So, on to the next one, which is my interpretation of an old-style farmhouse, and it is loosely based off some of the old clay houses in the Ukrainian village attraction in Alberta. I highly recommend checking it out if you happen to be in that province of Canada. But anyways, being based off that, it's kind of a low-slung, basic structure, no fancy frame. I've tried to make sure to keep the detail to the minimum. And of course, a nice, hardy inside with a loft. A staple of most of these houses, I noticed, was a loft. If they were big enough, they had a loft. And of course, I've tried to make it look like it's supported here, and basic details as well as the hardened dirt floor, which I guess this sort of looks like, because most of these houses didn't have proper floors because that was impractical for them. Here's a smelter room with just some put-out campfires in order to simulate stacked logs. I think that looks pretty nice, and a barrel with a lantern on it. Nothing too big or detailed. Of course, using the crouching mechanics of 1.14, I'm able to get in the low door. As you can see here, the layout on the outside is quite simple as well, nothing too complex. Of course, there's a bit of an awning for some more firewood and hay, and some containers on the outside, and that's about it. And don't need to have too much detail on these ones, they're just simple farmhouses. This house fits in a 14 by 21 area, and here are the blocks I've used. There's a little bit less. This is probably the simplest one I've designed, with the exception of the desert one, of course. So yeah, on to the next one, my beach house. This beach house, you might have noticed, looks startlingly similar to a Koopa Troopa shell from Mario Kart, and I've tried to kind of loosely base it off that by use the same sort of colors that the turtles in Minecraft have. So it's kind of like a cross between Minecraft turtle shells and Mario Kart turtle shells. And yeah, I've just basically made it sort of like a hut, like someone had found this, maybe of a giant turtle, and just hollowed it out and started living in it. The exterior, as with the mushrooms, was just trial and error. Do what looks good, and eventually you get it. There isn't really much else going on, except the underside, which I've used strip birch wood and birch planks, or birch slabs. Yeah, birch plank slabs, just to simulate kind of a worn down underbelly. Now, realistically, it wouldn't have decayed like this. It probably would have collapsed part of the skin, and there'd be more holes, and it would be, well, stinky. But of course, there's no smell in Minecraft, and Minecraft is not a realistic game by any means. So I can take liberties like making this unnaturally round turtle shell a house. On the inside, it's pretty simple as well. Just a pit in the center with a fireplace with some hammocks. Well, I tried to make hammocks. They're not too great. Probably can be done better with more time. And some shelves and barrels. So yeah, and of course the center chimney, which isn't quite center, but don't tell anyone. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's quite simple, with just a simple layout, like someone's just come in here and moved their supplies in without doing too much to the inside. Of course, skeleton's gone, and realistically that would be attached to the shell, but like I said earlier, Minecraft is not a realistic game, so we don't really have to worry about that too much. This beach house fits inside a 16 by 13 area, and here are the blocks I used. I've tried to use all the colors of green I can in order to make the shell look a little bit more interesting and have some more texture, like it's been sitting there for a while. On to the next one, which is the final one. This final house could fit in multiple themes, like underwater, or maybe it could be a moon base, like I've chosen here with the dead coral and gravel floor. Yeah, I've tried to use all gray blocks of buttstone for the floor, but that's not the important part. The important part is the house itself, which is sort of a modern, science-y, futuristic kind of build, which could, of course, like I said earlier, be situated in any place where there isn't oxygen, I guess, or maybe if there is, if someone really likes this kind of house, they can have it in their backyard if they're really rich. There isn't too much detail to this house other than just, well, the dome shapes, and this one is a basic circle made into a dome. This one's a slightly bigger circle made into a dome. I've just kind of joined them together, and I've added the purple terracotta. I think this is purple, it might be pink. Yeah, it's purple. Purple terracotta to give it some texture and color, so it doesn't blend too much with whatever background it's put against, just because, well, purple isn't a very common color in nature. So yeah, on the inside, of course, we have our airlock. Can't do without an airlock. And then a living space, which, well, I mean, this could be an oxygen recollector or something, or maybe a fluid cleanser or something to clean your urine so you don't have to go collect fluids from wherever remote location this house is situated, onto the bigger dome where there's some botany going on. So just plants. Here's a failed one to grow. Here's a quite a dangerous one if you know which this is. It's a wither rose. And then some other flowers just kind of growing in their own little, maybe, hydroponic gardens. So yeah, there isn't too much going on with this house. Just got to go out the entrance again. I love this airlock, and it times almost right. Sometimes it might let some air in, you never know. This house fits in a 27 by 30 area. Has the biggest floor area of all the houses, although it doesn't take up very much vertical space, but that's not what we're measuring here. Here are the blocks I've used. They're quite stark, like the futuristic house, except a little bit of gray to incorporate some modern science equipment, which of course isn't all Apple yet. I mean, Apple as in clean white. So most modern science equipment is quite, well, dirty in comparison, I guess. So that's it for the houses. I'm going to quickly switch it over to nighttime and then fly through all the houses once more just to see how they look in the dark. So I'll be right back. I'll just do that real quick. Alright, all set tonight, and here we go. So you can see sort of, I've tried to be mindful of where I put the lights. Never want to overdo lights. If you overdo lights, things look a little bit awkward. You just want to have just enough so it looks lived in, but obviously you don't want too much. So as you can see here, there are plenty of shadows. Shadows always add stuff in a build just as much as light does, so make sure to balance those two is my advice for building. As you can see here, this is living up to its lighthouse name like I mentioned before. The modern house doesn't have too much light because there aren't that many windows. Same with the rustic house, because, I mean, maybe just one person lives there, and the desert house is also quite dim. So you can see, and on all of these houses, I haven't overdone any lights. Well, I don't think I have. If you think otherwise, that's fine. But I've tried to keep lighting to a minimum, because obviously I don't really have to worry about mobs in creative. So yeah, that's about it. If you enjoyed, let me know. If you didn't enjoy, let me know what I can do better. If you want to see more of this, tell me in the comments below, or give me suggestions on what you want me to build next. I hope you drew inspiration from my builds. I have no problem with you using any of the techniques I've shown you in this video. I actually would really like if people would show me techniques they use. That would be fantastic. I love to learn from other people. But that's pretty much it for me. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. Have a fantastic day.